It's good night.
Greetings.
All right. Although I guess you have to say good night since they're seeing you in back.
Greetings, everyone.
Yes.
Yes, I. Welcome to UCU's Kwanzaa Everyday African Heritage Study Group. And we are so grateful to be here to continue with the reading of the Crucian Dialogues, written by Mario C. Moorhead. And you can get the Crucian Dialogue, the book, the hard copy, and the electronic version on Amazon. Or if you are here in the Virgin Islands, and that's where we are, YouTubers out there, we are here in St. Croix, in the Virgin Islands of the United States. And you can contact 340-277-7485. Again, 340-277-7485. And as I'm announcing this, our community announcement, it's available in our newspaper at www.ucu.web.com, and you'll see all the actions that you need to pay attention to. Yes.
Yes, sir.
So, where are we in our continuation? We will be reading on page 196. 196. And I'm excited. How about you? You cool?
I'm good.
All right. Did you introduce yourself? Oh, I'm Shalima. Just in case anyone's watching for the first time.
All right. Well, greetings and welcome back again for another episode of the reading African Heritage Study Group. And again, as Shalima stated earlier, we're reading Crucian Dialogue. We highly recommend that if you're a Virgin Islander or you're a person who wants to get an in-depth understanding of Caribbean history or an aspect of Caribbean history, one island of two, actually three in the Caribbean that we know had active revolts against the slavery situation. The book has a lot of dynamic facts and historical facts, and I encourage anyone within earshot that is hearing or even looking at this, if you're interested in history, you should get this book. Anyway, with that said, let's read.
Yes, and one quick thing, we are on our YouTube channel live, so you can visit us there. For our Facebookers at UCU Umoja Caribbean Union. Okay, that's our YouTube channel. Yes, and
we'll start. So I am going to be reading as me, and Shalima will be reading as she. All right, and now we'll start. If you're around at the time, I think you would have seen it coming. I'm telling you, not even homesteading could stop the bleeding. The world economy and politics were in turmoil. Sugar was no longer king. It had become just another commodity on the world market, subject to ever-increasing factors. Crucians was suffering the worst times this island would experience in the 20th century. What was called the Great Depression caused severe suffering here. Maybe we had the extreme depression. I can't overemphasize how bad it was. The federal government's New Deal CC camp was more popular with young men than the present oil refinery in our midst. The Civilian Conservation Corps offered employment with food, clothing, and shelter. Their most visible legacy was the dwindling survivors of the miles of coconut palms they planted along Centerline Road, now Queen Mary Highway.
That's something else I didn't know, but I feel you. I get the picture. Things were really, really bad. It's amazing there wasn't social disorder among a people who had recently thought they were seeing the promised land. I mean, there had to be a reaction in consciousness with the awareness and upbringing that the union activities would have brought about. No?
Maybe people were just too drained and dissipated from hunger and deprivation. I don't know, but I would agree that upbringing would have become more advanced and aware. In 1934, an uprising almost exploded after a Morris Davis mass meeting and rally. The outcry at the introduction of constitutional rule could be interpreted as another indication. When the Organic Act was enacted in 1936, you might consider it another one of those hollow victories. The governor would still be appointed by the President of the United States. A 16-member legislative body to be called a municipal council was established. It would meet in a joint session once a year. The nine-member St. Croix Municipal Council met on this island, while a seven-member council met on St. Thomas as the St. Thomas St. John Municipal Council. These council members were to be elected for a 2-year term. It was called universal suffrage since property ownership and income were no longer qualifications for voters. But guess what? It included the requirement that voters be literate in the English language.
Mm. Why would they include a qualification like that? I don't understand.
It puzzled many Crucians too. You see, by that time, Puerto Ricans were visibly more than a quarter of the population of St. Croix. But the great majority of them, while able to communicate with natives, were completely illiterate in the language.
So why include the English requirements? I still don't understand that.
Only in the context of the prohibition of foreign workers is the pattern visible. One of the first edicts coming from the Americans was to stop the importation of workers from any other part of the Caribbean but Puerto Rico. Remember me telling you that? And now we find that in 1936, they virtually excluded Puerto Ricans from the political process.
Divide and conquer? Is that what you're showing me? How the system kept any solidarity at a minimum just by controlling the structure of it? I know now that's what you want me to see. The Organic Act set up its own little apartheid system that would polarize the masses.
Mhm. And that only fueled the animosity between Crucians and Puerto Ricans as each group derided the other with names like Hookworm and Madomo. Every weekend seemed to bring violent clashes between the ethnicities. Fortunately, there were no firearms to be had, but machetes and other blades abounded. Puerto Rican villages were virtually off limit for many natives. The antagonism was so driven, it was palpable on the surface. It would take a generation for peaceable coexistence to be possible. And of course, the repeal of the divisive qualifications. But by then, the system would have created a new underclass to maintain social friction.
And that would have to be the so called aliens. Unbelievable. The structure they put in place right before our eyes, and we react like robots. We really must have cataracts on our eyes.
I think it's more a case of a virus attacking our computer program.
A virus, eh? That's a good one. But what does it do? And where would it come from?
Think about it. Admiral Martin King would have been the sole consciousness in our history to voice anything close to independence.
Hmm.
He was ready to kill all the white people, crude and barbaric, but at least he expressed the desire for us to go on our own. Not General Botto, not Queen Mary, not Joe Paris, and we know not your liberator David Hamilton Jackson.
But weren't you the one who pointed out how the people themselves weren't ready for more substantive changes because of the very lack of upbringing in their consciousness? You can't have it both ways.
If I accept that as a valid reason for the emancipation and Fireburn not going further than they did, how do I apply it to Mr. Jackson? His upbringing was stellar compared to those who went before him. Could it have been so one sided? He couldn't see any greater potential in his people?
So, where is this virus you're talking about?
Right in front of you. It's activated every time we have a thought about doing anything independent of white people. And over time, it has conditioned us to the path of least resistance. Our life story tells us it's easier to take it out on those least able or likely to fight back. If time, let me see, if time and again we tried to do for ourselves, but we got crushed by the powers, but curiously, we were allowed and in fact encouraged to berate the powerless. How long would it be before we spontaneously smile at the powerful and stare at the powerless and sneer at the powerless? And especially so when just coincidentally an underclass is in our midst, even more miserable than we are. It might have been Rwanda, but the formula was much too similar, and the inability of Crucian leadership only contributed to the problem. No effort was made to promote self-confidence. The more we depended, the angrier we became, and all the more prone to hate those even more dependent.
Hmm. Talk about a virus. That's some serious stuff. But the man said that a rose by any other name would still smell the same. Aren't you talking about black inferiority? With all that clinical explanation, all I can say I heard was that Martin King was the only one in a leadership position to express the confidence that black people could survive on their own. Why didn't you just say that? I've noticed that you could get carried away with your explanations and end up preaching to me. You said I was intelligent and a fast learner. So lighten up and get to the point. If I don't understand, I'll say so.
You know, you are right on target. I deserve that. I apologize, and I'll try to stay on point. With Lagrange closing down, the island was left with Central Factory in Bass End as the only source of sugar. Molasses and rum continued to be produced at a handful of estates, but there was no Casper Holstein to come to the rescue. The Red Cross did what it could, setting up distribution points for staples to feed angry Crucians. The war didn't come soon enough. When the United States joined the fight in World War II, every able every able-bodied man was ready to sign up. Then another reality surprised the Crucians. The Selective Service didn't extend to the Virgin Islands, but it was available in Puerto Rico. Until arrangements could be made, many young men found their way to Puerto Rico where they were allowed to sign up. The demand was such, transportation was provided for until the selective service could be established in the territory.
Nothing came easy, did it? Not even the volunteering of your life. But did that mean the island was void of young men during the war? Wouldn't the economy have collapsed? Didn't Puerto Ricans join the army too?
When the selective service arrived in 1943, Puerto Ricans were flocking to sign up as eagerly as Crucians. But in the meantime, the war had given the economy a boost. Rum and molasses experienced a spike in demand. Vicorp, the federal corporation, was producing a rum labeled Government House. But as you pointed out, the labor force was negatively impacted just when the economy needed workers. Well, for your information, the system wasn't unaware of the problem. During the war, the federal government changed its immigration policies. Suddenly, foreign workers were once again welcome, and this would mark the first immigration of workers from our surrounding English-speaking neighbors since the transfer in 1917.
But of course, how convenient that the policy would change just when their interests required it.
Maybe you don't know that the American government itself was desperately in need of labor. They were building bases right here. People think it was just in St. Thomas with the submarine base, but they were building and operating bases here too, both in Estate St. John and the present airport site. They brought many of their own people, but they needed a lot of laborers. So, yes, a labor shortage did develop, but the system was able to fill the gap as Puerto Ricans were eagerly attracted to the security of military service. The most cost-effective labor pool was the foreign workers from the Eastern Caribbean. Then, in 1944, Vico reopened and modernized Bethlehem Sugar Factory. It was a glorious day on the island, one of very few, one of the very few, and it was celebrated by the union demanding a pay raise. I mention this to introduce you to a Crucian who's too often overlooked, Ludwig E. Harrigan. Have you ever heard of him?
Isn't he the man for Harrigan Court in West End? But to tell you the truth, I don't know who he is.
Another brilliant Crucian. He returned to the island after many years in New York City, where he was one of the highest ranking officials in Marcus Garvey's UNIA.
I can't believe that. They just have this huge portrait of the man on the side of one of the buildings, but it doesn't say anything. I suppose our assimilated leadership might be embarrassed to acknowledge his association with blackness. What a shame.
While in the municipal council, Mr. Harrigan sponsored the measure that gave us our wage and our law. As a visionary, he was up there with Mr. Jackson. It was our loss that he passed away in 1951. After a strike in 1945 as president of the union, he was able to negotiate a contract paying $1.36 a day.
Mr. Harrigan seemed to be the kind of man I would have liked to know. Hearing so little about David Hamilton Jackson, I'm not surprised to know that there were other good people I didn't know about. It's just so depressing to become aware of it.
Are you familiar with Walter I.M. Hodge? better known as Brother Hajj.
Isn't that another housing project? The one we call Safarali? But I don't think I recall them calling anybody Brother Hodge.
Everybody called him Brother Hajj. He returned from World War II to become a politician like no other, a huge cigar smoking man that you could find in the park or a street corner in the West End town. Gregarious, jovial, and down to earth, he always had a story to share with you. He was the politician's politician on this island into the 60s.
Sounds like another man I'd have loved to know. Why don't we have men like those anymore?
Don't be too sure we don't. We might not have politicians with his style of politics, but as far as his decision making and his behind the scene deal making, we still have too much of that.
Do you mean this mismanagement and corruption?
Not really. He wasn't any more crooked or corrupt than any other. That's not what I meant. I was more thinking in terms of consciousness, something pervasive with our leadership. Like our politicians today, Brother Hodge couldn't conceive of us standing on our 2 feet without the help of white people. Ludwig Harrigan was the most conscious leader we've had. He would actually lecture Crucians on the value of land, why we should try to acquire as much as we could, and why we should never sell land. The man spoke to black people as African descendants. The only thing he lacked was the concept of mental slavery.
So, how is it that Mr. Harrigan didn't have a greater impact? Didn't his conscious leadership influence the upbringing of the masses?
In his day, he was a giant. The people responded to him. Mr. Harrigan just didn't have enough time, both as a union leader and a politician. He was well respected and supported, but he hadn't even been back a decade when he passed away.
Hmm. And where was David Hamilton Jackson when all of this was going on? Still on the bench?
He retired to his residence on Company Street in Bass End in 1941.
Hmm.
On several occasions, my brother and I accompanied our parents on Sunday afternoon visits to the great man. My grandfather would never join us. He never spoke to Mr. Jackson after he left the Union.
That's so sad. You mean not even in old age could they reconcile their differences?
Hmm.
Wow.
They were two very strong-willed men. No amount of love or money could have brought these two men together again. But in reality, their time had passed. The post-war generation will take us the rest of the way. But I must say something about the formal upbringing the society was providing. The Danes never established more than a primary or elementary schools. We we spoke of we spoke of. Then the Navy ratcheted it up to the ninth grade and junior high school. After the first public school opened on St. Thomas in 1931, those who could afford it, Melvin H. Evans, our first elected governor being one, went to Charlotte Amalie to attend high school. St. Croix didn't get a high school until 1935. The curriculum offered standard courses with local teachers supplementing the foreign material with their experience. Crucian students were diligent and took to the discipline offered by the teachers they know and respected.
Sounds to me like you didn't think the school system was all that bad. Don't tell me we had some conscious teachers too.
No, it wasn't all of that, just that it was more effective as a school system than what we have now. Students were disciplined and they learned, while the course of study might not have been any more designed for African descendants than today's. The homegrown core of teachers made the difference between them and now.
So students were being prepared with a better foundation than they are now. We just weren't learning about ourselves back then either. And as long as we denied our blackness, it wasn't about to happen. Like you've said, the last thing we ever wanted to do was identify with our African roots. That only leaves us the alternative of learning to be white.
Just as long as you're not thinking that to study and learn is a white thing. Let me let me most emphatically say that science is not a white discipline. The natural sciences are universal truths we need to master. The problem is what they call the humanities. Those are fields of study peculiar to all people. Asian has their own humanities, European have theirs, and the Americans have done everything to distinguish their humanities from those of the Europeans. The question no one seems to ask is what about the African humanities? Ever since our conquest, the only humanities we're exposed to are those of white people. And mind you, humanities are the study dealing with the thoughts and relations of people as opposed to science. If an Asian wanted to study white humanities, they would attend a white university. Conversely, if a European wanted to learn Asian humanities, they would attend an Asian institution. To prevent, let me see, the present state of education simply makes no attempt to develop any Black or African humanities. As a result, our teachers, whether local or imported, are coming to the classroom with their with their consciousness already finely tuned by the humanities they sucked up in school, qualifying to become educators to our children. And as you can see, our children are rejecting this training or miseducation in larger numbers every year. The performance of our school system is already frightening.
Everybody agrees we are not reaching our children. And that's a pitiful state when a community, actually an island, can't educate its own children. And what's so frightening is that it will continue to get worse because our leadership will never admit to being Black. Which governor will ever say we have to teach Black children about themselves? That's what makes it so scary. My awareness that as far as I can see in the future, our Black leaders will never talk publicly about Blackness. So you know that means they won't take action. Not them.
Unfortunate but true. And that's our race against time to develop conscious leaders before we descend into chaos. So far, we've been fortunate to generate favorable climates for the development of such conscious leadership, but never the jackpot. Why couldn't we have been fortunate enough to have the likes of Mr. Jackson to understand the need for mental emancipation? We've had the fertile conditions, though, Another overlooked area of our history is the economy. You tend to forget there was other economic activity the monocrop, besides the monocrop agriculture of sugarcane. Granted, there would be no economy of scale to measure up, but it's worth our while to take a peek at the embryo of what could have developed into a sustainable economy from the inside out. When the United States took possession of this island, there were but a handful of locally owned businesses, and they would have been in the nature of small dry goods variety shops in both towns. As African descendants escaped the estates when they found employment in the town, they invariably found themselves in colored parts of town, whether blacksmith, tinsmith, tailor, or shopkeeper. They could be found in Freegut, east or west, undisturbed and neglected by the establishment. The experience of business enterprise was being absorbed by those who took the risk seriously. When Governor Walter Evans and his hatred Marines finally departed, a tiny merchant class began to emerge. My grandfather was one of the few brave ones to try manufacturing by building a plant to produce and bottle soft drinks. And I can testify, no soda ever tasted better than my grandfather's. Where else could you get flavors like lime Ricky, ice cream, and damson? No soda has ever tasted as good as those original brown sodas.
Awesome. Brown sodas? You got to be joking. Was your grandfather the brown for brown sodas? Lord, I wish they could bring them back. I willingly will confess the addiction I had to those sodas. They tasted so good. They were the bomb. And I never got to taste the original. I just had to have a brown soda to wash down my food. Well, now I've heard it all. But what happened to it?
My cousin inherited it and they sold it. Apparently, the new people couldn't make a go of it.
Well, my son, I wish somebody would take it over and start producing those sodas again. But you're right about that inside out economy. Just those sodas could have been the start of something sustainable that was local.
Have you ever heard of the man they call the grocer?
No, I don't think so. Who was that?
Alexander Moorhead, my father. I'm going to try to use him to demonstrate my point.
If you will keep this up, by the time we're finished, I'll have a good grasp of the upbringing that made you.
My father was a school teacher when it occurred to him that he could make a return with a procurement contract to supply the school lunch program. And indeed, he was able to secure a contract and profitably provision the program. This then was the beginning of the grocer career as a merchant, from a pickup truck to a King Street address with a shop downstairs with living quarters upstairs. My father envisioned supplying the country shops with the various villages across the island, in much the same way he serviced the school lunch program. Acquiring a larger truck, the grocer devised a schedule for his truck to cover every village on the island and schedule. Some village shops were visited more than once a week,
but every shop across the countryside saw the big red truck at least once a week. Reliably and deliberately, wholesale business was established with a network of retail outlets in the village center of every functioning estate. And on this foundation, he then went about securing exclusive distributorship to anchor the fledgling wholesale business.
I really don't want to interrupt. I so much want to hear this, so forgive me that I don't understand what seems to be some kind of difference between wholesale and this exclusive dis- distributorship anchor. Could you explain what you're talking about? I think I understand retailing and wholesaling, but you lost me after that.
A distributorship is a representative or agent of the manufacturer, and an exclusive distributor represents a manufacturer to the exclusion of anyone else in a given area or region. Meaning that if my father was the exclusive distributor for a manufacturer on the island, no other person or business would be able to import or distribute the manufacturer's product on this island. My father would contractually have the exclusive right to import, distribute, and wholesale that manufacturer's products on this island.
Are all wholesalers distributors? I'm not sure I understand the difference between them.
A wholesaler sells in large quantities, with their customers being primarily retailers who would then resell those goods in small quantities or individually. A distributor, on the other hand, represents a manufacturer. Whether exclusively or not, a distributor has the distinction of being the agent or representative of a product or products in a given area.
So, if a business is an exclusive distributor on this island, whoever wants to purchase that product on the island would have no choice but to purchase it from the exclusive distributor.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Oh, distributor. Sorry, I lose myself. That's basically the concept. Just remember that the distributor doesn't have to be a retailer. A distributor's business is to supply all outlets in their exclusive area. So don't get the idea that an exclusive distributor is the same thing as a monopoly. The exclusivity is strictly between a manufacturer and his distributor, because it then becomes in the interest of the distributor to have every retail outlet selling the products he represents.
Doesn't that mean that if a distributor could lock in?
Can stations and short wave until St. Thomas got a station in the early 50s. So it wasn't like we had the media to tell us what to buy, other than a dozen or so brand name products that establish themselves in our consciousness from what little radio there was and our once a week movie house. The grocer had no way of knowing what manufacturer's product would be successful, and I was witness to many duds and flops over the years. I can clearly recall his frustration with many an item or brand that he thought would be winners, but he wouldn't find his niche. Trial and error led the next, huh?
Good, fine.
He would find his niche. Trial and error would lead to inexorably to liquor, less canned goods, fewer staple provisions like flour, meal, and sugar, but he kept leaders like Uncle Ben Rice, what a seller that was. By the 1950s, the inventory had become mostly liquor and beer, with him holding the exclusive contract on many of the spirits and all the beer he sold. The rest of the inventory was high turnover, fast moving items from brand names and usage, malt, drinks, and the ever present cigarettes, for which he held exclusivity.
You're just full of surprises. Your father's name wants to sound familiar to me, but I've never heard of him or the business you described. Wow, I mean, you've really had some preparation for your role, and I would guess there's more to come. Tell me, wouldn't your father have been competing against the whites who owned everything? You never mentioned anything about the other businesses.
The royal family, as they were called, operated the estates and collected rent from the workers who continued to live in what were, for the most part, the slave quarters of yesteryear. If you were in the position to buy an automobile, you had to come from Armstrong in Boston or Fleming in West End. If you needed building materials, hardware, or white goods like stoves and refrigerator, then it was Scotch in Boston and Merwin in West End. The royal family couldn't be bothered with the trivial business of wholesale and retail to the masses. So you see, the field was clear and open for the Crucian and immigrant Puerto Rican.
Something else I never knew or realized. So small businesses were controlled by locals. What a turnaround in a few generations.
That's right. Not one white person on this island sold liquor or cigarettes, not even at the distributor level. Our control was vertical. We owned and controlled from the top to the bottom. When we entered the 60s, the grocer, the grocer was one of the biggest local merchants on the island.
What happened?
Just keep listening. The decades of the 1950s continued the Cuban economic misery. A brief post-war upswing had dissolved into a recession that brought renewed degradation. The overreaching news, the overarching news of the decade would be July 22nd, 1954, revised Organic Act.
And we stop here tonight on page 203. We will continue next Wednesday in the reasoning or the reading on page 204. So at this time, and thank you, I know for the comments that the volume is low. If you are on St. Croix, I don't know how St. Thomas and John is right now, but we have a serious downpour of rain. So it was or it is challenging, and I'll try and get a little mic here. So in this next half an hour in reasoning, hopefully you'll be able to hear us clearer. All right. So let me just make a little quick move. All right. Closer. Woo-hoo-hoo!
Can you guys hear?
Can you hear the thunder roaring? Anyway, it's a blessing. So let's get straight to it.
Well, it's very interesting to get an understanding of the trajectory the downward trajectory, even though we thought that we were moving into an area where we would see some level of improvement through the labor union, it seems like we were just basically stuck, you know. And I think, according to Mario, I guess he had to do a lot with the lack of black consciousness, you know. Um, it was interesting that he brought up Ludwig, Harrigan, and his participation in the Marcus Garvey UNIA organization. That was very interesting to me. But what really got me was the fact that despite all that went on in our history, the only person from the inception of the revolt to that point in history that really had the aptitude to change the direction from the very inception was Admiral Martin, you know, and to know that we big up these queens and not to take nothing away from them, but they never really even had that level of consciousness. They were just individual that was really solely about trying to, get better wages, right?
And the injustice.
And the injustice. So it wasn't really leading from a black consciousness perspective with the queens. It was just really about injustice and being able to survive. They would have continued working the fields had they felt that they were making just slightly more money, And what was also interesting is the fact that General Modo, even though he was a leader in this thing, he wasn't as open to the idea of an absolute blackness as Admiral Martin. But what I would say, as we caught up in coming into the 20th century, the mid 20th century, was the budding class of merchants that was springing up locally. That segment of the economy, and to know that I live on St. Croix at a portion when that was actually taking place and was shifting, to know where we live in a time where basically 98% of all the economic activity is controlled by other groups of people except the Afrikan and the Crucians. It's surprising to know that the Africans and the Crucians seek employment, even though you had a point in time when you had a budding erection of entrepreneurs that was coming up on this island. That seems to totally fade from the landscape now.
Mm-hmm.
That is what's incredible.
Yeah. Because it's like looking at today, in today's, one would ask the question, was there ever like locally owned businesses more than, especially in areas that like say the distributor part of it,
Right. Right. You mentioned Armstrong.
Yes.
And Norway. You're talking about two local car distributors, right? It was interesting to see how that came about, Maybe I'm right. Because I think he did mention about if you wanted a car, right? And the reason why I was saying that, because he was saying that the local people control the retail and wholesale sector of all goods. You know what I mean? I know Armstrong, maybe I'm incorrect with the Armstrong name.
No, Armstrong or
was a local name, right?
But I will
Yeah.
we could go back here and
Yeah, because Armstrong owned the ice cream now, so you know, going back to that is not the same.
I don't know if there is
A connection.
a connection with the Armstrong ice cream family with the Armstrong motors.
Mm.
I don't know, but it would be good to find out if anyone knows. You know,
Well, certainly Merwin.
Merlin.
Yeah, Merwin, right here locally in Fredericksburg.
Curran was what?
Merwin, he was just a contractor and owned those next two buildings right there from the customs house.
Wow.
This right here and south of the custom house.
And he was a local.
He was a local white boy. You know,
Oh,
he
so
was
okay.
he was the overseer. You know, from the overseer.
Oh, okay. So then, because how I read it in the book, I got the royalty as they were called
Yeah.
had no interest in the retail and wholesale sector of the island. They were more focused on bigger business, supplying the markets that they were accustomed to. So that's why I was going there. But it's interesting to come back to the point where today, 2021, we have less locally owned business than what was going on even when I was coming up as a child.
Yeah.
You know what I
Even
mean?
me, since I got here in 1980,
Right.
you know, hey, it's a lot less
Yeah.
than it was.
So I'll just read a section that spoke about it.
Okay.
So it says the royal family, as they were called, operated the estates and collected rent from the workers who continued to live in what were, for the most part, the slave quarters of yesteryear. If you were in a position to buy an automobile, it had to come from Armstrong in Boss End, that's up east, or Fleming in West End. If you needed building materials, hardware, or white goods like stoves and refrigerators, then it was Skiotch in Boss End or Merwin in West End. The royal family couldn't be bothered with the trivial business of wholesale and retail to the masses. So you see, the field was clear and open for the Crucians and immigrants, Puerto Ricans.
Okay. So that was saying that those overseer class, that class, they control those items. Yeah. Okay.
The bigger,
And right. But the smaller consumable items, they have no interest in. You know, which is cool. But even with the car dealership, look at Hendrix.
Yeah.
Look at Hendrix Motors. Right? Because I know that's a local company.
yeah, that's been
Local
in
black
operation
family.
for years. I don't know how.
A long time.
But yeah.
Yeah, Hendrix
In the
and
80s,
St. Croix.
they were there in the 80s.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that you look at the disparity today in terms of economic control, right? And you would say that even though that generation had a lot of resistance in the way of direct resistance, right? They were more gung-ho about, taking the kind of risk necessary. However, if the generation after them, right, they went to college, because I'm pretty sure most of that generation went to college, but they came back and what did they do? They end up either going into the military, staying in the military, going into government jobs. You know what I'm saying? So they never perpetuated, they never continued, that thing. And so what happened is that you had that original class that was aging out with no succession there, because you created some bougie uppity black folks at the time with no black consciousness, right? Who were in line of trying to follow and do what the white man do and live like how the white man live, and therefore didn't really pay attention to the succession of the businesses that were formed. because almost all of those businesses right now are closed.
If you get a paycheck with the paycheck thing, paycheck and just get a get a job, get a paycheck, you know, buy a house, buy your land, buy a boat, but just you know,
Go to work.
yeah, no entrepreneurship, no,
Slave
yeah,
mentality.
yeah,
And it's so funny because as I spoke about the idea of trying to get more wages,
yeah,
it was the queen, the labor revolts was like, we want more money.
yeah,
It wasn't about we want our freedom. They
Yeah.
said we want our freedom,
yeah,
but it wasn't really about wanting our freedom because I think at that point, right, after the queen shot, I think it shortly after the queen, they released all restrictions and allow the workers now, the laborers now, to be able to roam free, to go and come as they please, right?
Yeah, to a state.
To escape, to make visit.
Right.
So, but they never, you know what I'm saying? They were just in that whole mode of we'll go back to the plantation. We just want a few more cents. We want to go
Yeah.
from 5 cents to 10 cents.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
As opposed to we don't want to work for you.
Right,
We don't want to have nothing to do with you.
So maybe it was a few of them, right, who took that as an opportunity. Because I think I read it earlier, where some took the opportunity now that they could go to other plantations, right, to acquire more skills. And as they acquire more skills, then they receive more pay. So I mean, it's kind of still.
I understand that.
But it's also the skills, the
Right.
development of
But I was, and I mean, maybe it's timely, maybe it's something that we had to go through as a people, because if you go back to the earlier points of the book with the Maroons, they survived, but when they were confronted with the Danes, right, they disappeared
yeah,
because many of them were killed. They couldn't sustain. So maybe we weren't right at that point in time for Admiral Martin King type of approach to just totally cut ourselves off and go back to maroon living. You know what I'm saying? But I'm saying now, even if you look at vocational skill, in the context of our social and economic um, advancement,
yeah,
you find that we have very few skilled tradesmen and women in the Virgin Islands. And if you do find them, they're migrants or immigrants or what they call them. I don't even want to call them immigrants.
right,
They're our brothers from the other islands to the south.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying? So, and they're already hitting that point where they're easing up. You know what I'm saying? So you having a total class of people under that has no skill, that don't have an idea how to build a road.
right.
You know,
No masonry, no plumbing, no, yeah. Let's go. But look, this, and if you look at the overall picture, this happens in all, not all, can't say that, I don't know all, but certainly it happened in the States. The same system, the same kind of way, right? The same kind of format, right? Was get a job, right? Rather than build your business, and hand it down. Generational wealth. Generational wealth was cut off, or we didn't even have that in our consciousness, And so, and I saw the same thing in India. I saw the same thing in Africa, in Israel. I saw the same, and I lived it in the States, right? And here when I came here, same. So those in those three areas, you see the same type of developmental process, because that's our development, self-development was so pushed down. It seemed like Admiral King right? And there's always an admiral king in these situations, right?
Yes,
The
so there
crew.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always someone that has just a little higher consciousness that moves, but he doesn't have the following. He doesn't have the
The
people.
charisma.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And even if he has the charisma, there's nobody that's paying no attention.
Right.
He said, "Give me the money, give me the material wealth, and so I can satisfy my children, right?" And it wasn't even about education.
Right. Right. But you see, the thing about it is, as you mentioned, money. And the total, when we become a species far removed from interacting with nature for our survival,
Yeah.
we become
Yeah.
reliant on an artificial thing. And that's what was happening there.
Right.
Because what was happening now, they got caught in this cycle, this trap of you can't really provide for yourself like you would like to, because now you're stuck in this contract that you have to work for money.
Yeah.
And so money became the motivating factor for everything.
Yeah.
Your quality of life became a measurement of how much money you have and you can get. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And this is what we've seen today, that the quote unquote upward mobility of society
Yeah.
creates a basic shift where people are no longer thinking logically about what skills do I truly need to survive.
Yeah.
They're more thinking about how much zeros I could have behind a particular figure in my bank account, because I could survive with that.
Right.
And it's in some instances tied to, okay, getting a wage increase, right? Some people may not even see it as a way to like save or invest in something where that they can now become more independent than dependent on getting a wage increase every year. Some waste it, in other words.
Yeah.
They just waste it. And then when the cost of living increases, that same increase that they got is like it depletes because the cost of living increases at the same time. So definitely the consciousness have to be aware, have to increase as far as what you can do, to really become more independent than being dependent all the time.
So here's my thing. As long as you are moving through the system, as long as you're moving through the system where you are depending on these factors of economics, income, that are external, you will always have an overall.
Yeah.
Right? The truth behind this is that we have to start to get to a place where we erect a consciousness of not just independence but sovereignty, right? Because we will not be able to maneuver if we don't get to that place. Because the powers that be, with their economic system that they put in place, will be forever beholden to if we don't seek sovereignty. If we don't seek total freedom.
And on a mass level, will that ever happen? That's the thing. You can see pockets of it happening in different places in the world, and in Africa, different places. But on the mass level, it sounds like it's hundreds of years away in terms of being able to change that momentum, change that paradigm of dependency and just material as your value. You value in material, and that makes you worth something. That which is right, totally opposite.
No, you're correct. What I'm saying, I don't think we'll ever get to that max.
Yeah.
Right? I think what the focus needs to be is the small group, people who feel the need to become a little bit more connected. Um, and I would say that it needs to start with the individual thinking like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we will ever get there because the way this thing is set, you have many of our people who have sold us out and will continue to sell us out for this illusion of wealth that they put in front of us. You know what I mean? So I don't think we will ever see um, the masses of people, not no time soon.
Yeah,
I think what needs to happen, it would have to be small groups of people. Now I will say this, if you could get 144,000 people together thinking like that,
yeah, yeah.
then you have a nation, you know, then you have a nation. And that's still a big thing, but in the scheme of the world population, that's still very small, you know, that's still very small. And being able to identify land that are
Yeah.
by tradition, I don't even want to say tradition, but by the fact of, you know, you being connected to that land so long, being indigenous to that land,
Yeah, yeah.
that there's some level of reclamation and assertion of your rights, allodial rights
Yeah,
to land, allodial title. Yeah. Anyway, we come to the end. Is it time? You okay? You alright, Olu?
Yes, I. Listen, when it rains, it pours, okay? And when it pours, sometimes it floods,
Slippery.
okay? So just saying that to say, with the information that is being retrieved from the book that we are reading from, Crucian Dialogues. So it's like, it's a lot, just like a lot of rain, right? And in some instance, rain right now is a blessing to some folks who are in need of having their cistern, their well, their buffalo filled. And in some instances, it's it's a nightmare because of the fact that their homes are in disrepair. Okay, so with the information that we're getting from this book, what do we do with this knowledge? How do we apply it? Should we apply it? And if so, in what way should we apply it? You know? So it's just like with the abundance of rain, right? And water. So how do we apply capturing the water so that in preparation of droughts or what have you, we can continue to have irrigation to for our plants. So it's like it's like how you look at situations. You can look at it in a positive, or you can look at it in a negative. Nature has a way of teaching us and helping us to understand things. So yeah, grateful for the rain.
Grateful. That's great.
Grateful for reading this book and the knowledge that is coming as a result of that.
Absolutely.
So it was also interesting that the author, Mario Moorhead, in which he's the character me, but he's also the characters. I mean, he's brilliant
Right
And-
More
inspired.
heads, more heads.
Yes, yes, I indeed a true representation of the name,
Yes,
right?
more heads.
Yeah, seriously, it's like almost like, oh wow, it's a discussion that Mara and I am actually having, So it's like it's funny, So knowing, of course, that with his who was his grandfather.
Grandfather.
Yeah, so his disappointment in David Hamilton Jackson,
Yeah.
Even to the point where they were like aging, that he just felt so disheartened, that David Hamilton Jackson left the Union, and he just did not want to continue to even engage in meeting him. That Mario said he and his family would go and visit David Hamilton Jackson, but his grandfather would not, Yeah, so it's lessons to learn. And it's like you're going grudge,
Well, I don't think it was a grudge like that. I think it was more the value.
Right.
Disappointment. Yeah, the disappointment and the people that were supportive, and then to have the leadership, change direction. The leadership changing directions was so important. But his grandfather couldn't handle that. Grandfather couldn't handle it. In terms of what, and you can imagine all the years and the energy that they put behind, the union, and even before the pre-union stuff, and then having the union, and then having Deisha Burton and the United States come in and change that energy, oppress the potential of what was really gonna,
and the economic impact it would have had, if St. Croix Labor Union was successful and without having the interference with the United States and the international union that came in and stuff like that, they would have been thriving. So to know that his grandfather continued in the vision of economics that he created, to me, and I agree with the character, that brown soda was the thing. I mean, it's like almost addiction to the brown soda, especially the original before it got sold and the recipe changed or what have you. But that was a thriving, industry business here, and it's just a potential that we need to really realize that, hey, we have creativity and we can apply it and earn from from that creativity.
And also the people, right? The people have to they have to support you. They have to come to your business and get the product. They have to have the consciousness to support you, and they can go right over there to Merwin or somebody else and get even at a cheaper price.
Right.
That's the key.
So I will admit, like years
Black
ago.
Wallow and Annie's.
Thank you. Yes, it's nice. I hope you're enjoying the reading and the reasoning. Because what better time to drink some nice hot tea, right? Rainy and cold. So thank you.
Yeah, but getting back to the understanding of what we need to have going forward, because now we're like maybe 5 generations, not even 5. I would say 3 generations out from that point in history. 3, maybe 4.
When I came here, I heard about brown soda. It was so even it was the second. It was not the original,
Right.
but the name brown soda,
Right.
was we had heard about it.
Right.
People.
But I was saying that being now either the 3rd or 4th generation out from those pioneers, we need to start to reassert ourselves as to the parts we're going to play going forward as it pertains to economic growth and development. And instead of trading ourselves and focusing on wealth and solely what we call return on investment, as opposed to focusing on a living rate of return. You know what I mean?
Living rate of
A
return.
living rate of return. And just to give the people then that what that really means, a rate, a rate, a ROI, a rate of a return on your investment, right? Meaning solely having to do with how much money your money can make. But when you're talking about a living rate of return, you're talking about the social impact of what it is the investment made, right? So you're talking directly, how is this going to directly impact your quality of life positively, right? For instance, living rate of return, we have a very poor educational system. We invest in a school that provides a kind of curriculum that will give our young people the education they need, right, to be able to take us in a different direction, right? That's a direct impact because now we who have children and grandchildren that could benefit directly from that. So the quality of life shifts tremendously. So that's what living rate of return really is. And it's to be able to focus our attention not so much of our return on investment monetarily, but the social return, the
the
the humanity.
Yes.
Right.
And actually, UCU in the concept of workforce development, youth workforce development is a school. Is a school that you learn a trade and then you learn the consciousness that's going to keep you in your sovereignty, keep you right there, right? So we have an opportunity to really put that into force because look at the resistance that we get with this
C19.
1840. What is it?
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's the the initiative about the law of 1984 and 85 when Bert Bryant about made when the legislature passed the law initiated by Bert Bryant and others, right, to have Caribbean and local history taught in the school from K through 12. Right there, look at the resistance. 30 years, 35 years that has not that there hasn't been a political consciousness enough to make sure that that's implemented in the society here in the VI.
So you see comments from several people who have who've been watching the replay, of this, that they were very shocked, so to speak, as far as the history here in St. Croix or even in the Caribbean. That it's like, wow, they didn't know. So now it's like now there's a sense of wow,
Ownership.
I'm gonna do better than what happened, or I'm gonna pay attention to what's going on more.
Right.
So it's like when they deny people their history, then the people will be lost.
Right.
And it's like, what purpose do they serve? Do I serve being here in St. Croix, being here in the Virgin Islands? What purpose do I really serve for the community?
The empowerment that it gives you when you know your history, that is so dynamic. It makes you want to move. It makes you want to create. It makes you want to work with others. It makes you want to do things and manifest.
Right.
It makes you want to manifest something that's for us. That's for we.
Well, the saying goes, he who don't know his history is doomed to repeat it. And that's why the effort is being made to consistently, create propaganda and to hide and to distort facts as much as possible, so that the coming generation don't know, or have a connection to their past.
Right.
And the truth about this idea of Sankofa is that you have to be able to look into the past to learn from the mistake of the past, understanding why you're here now and what you need to do in order to change your trajectory. You always have to be, correcting your course, through the future.
Correct.
You know?
And we are the ones, we are the living ones, from our ancestors who is like, okay, well, I'm going to do better. I know what happened back then. And now at least it prepares me to do better moving forward, So last words, because time has been called. Olu?
Well,
Malachi?
yeah,
Last words?
it gives you, what Mario C. Moorhead has done for me, for the art. It gives me a clearer perspective on where I need to put my energies, where I need to focus and who I need to focus it with. That's very clear. And once in my era of time, or my age group, right? What has been disappointing, right? Like some of the people, like Soldier, like for instance, Soldier says that he's disappointed in a certain age group. Like I was disappointed in a certain age group that where I came from too. It keeps going back, right? Until the Haitian Revolution, or until it goes back. Each generation has there's forward motion, and then there's 2 steps back. It's just, it has to get to the point where the small group of people, right, become the leadership. There's the small group of conscious people become the leadership and demonstrate the truth of solidarity, the truth of sovereignty, the truth of nation building, and even beyond nation building, right? It's like clans and tribes, empires. Those were the things that those were the structures that our ancestors really brought us that were successful. When you really look at the monuments tell you what was really successful in those era of time. So Mario C. Moorhead has really, it's a masterpiece, really. It's a masterpiece.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm grateful to be able to participate in this. What is important again is being able to recognize where we are at based on the circumstances that took place beforehand, the situations that took beforehand, right? And being able now to see what's being laid out for us. And being able to say, as a collective, do we want to go with this or do we want to go with that, right? And really, we need to get to that place. Now, I am saying it's great if we can get small groups of people to recognize that, but I think that individually, we have to begin to work towards that.
Absolutely.
And I think like begets like. You know what I mean? And that if I'm making a forward motion in that direction, you making a forward, then we begin to collaborate. Tribes are necessary. We need to be able to rekindle an identity for ourselves, so that we have something to begin to lay a foundation with. Man, we need to escape the 5 institutions. But anyway, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. See you around next time.
Yeah.
Yes. So thank you guys for your participation in our African Heritage Study Group reading the book Crucian Dialogues. Definitely give thanks to Maris Moorhead, and you can obtain your own copy of the book by going to Amazon, that's online, or St. Croix, might be in St. Thomas, but call this local number 340-277-7485. And we are going to continue reading each Wednesday except the first Wednesday of the month, okay, 7 o'clock p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. I'm going to just share some announcements that's coming up in a couple of days. What's coming up in a couple of days? Let's see. And I'm reading from the community announcement page, UCU's newspaper. You can get yours to at www.ucu.webs.com. Download it. It's for free. Donations always appreciated. So on Sundays, Kemetic Yoga with Darshanya, that takes place at the beach at 9 o'clock a.m. and at 7 a.m. on Wednesdays. So contact her for further information on Facebook at Darshanya, or email her at darshanya.info@gmail.com. Then the Ethiopian World Federation Local Number 5A General Meetings takes place the first and third Sunday of the month. And this Sunday is the third. Is it the third already?
They said the 9th, the 8th, 17th.
Yeah, the third Sunday.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. At 3 p.m. Okay, so contact email wise TEWF local number 5, all spelled out, okay, at gmail.com. Visit on Facebook at TEWFL5. And again, that's 3 p.m. at the Ethiopian World Federation local number 5 space. Is the headquarters located on King Street, okay, Frederickstead.
Mm-hmm.
And this Sunday is a continuation. Well, it has been due to some downpour situation of rain.
Mm-hmm.
But let's be hopeful either way. Mario Moorhead Community Book Reading, that takes place Sundays at 5:30 p.m. at the Door Center in Frederickstead, St. Croix, and readers are needed. And you can contact Marilyn Aisha Hodge at 340-626-5329. And let me just express sympathy, love, strength to Marilyn, who recently lost her mom.
Yes.
So if anything, just leave a message if you don't get her personally. But just send her your regards, okay? And
I
next-
have to just
sure.
when you finish.
so because that's next week. Next week there are things happening.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. Where is it? Reggae at Sunset,
Mhm.
Door Center. That's Friday, October 22nd, 2021. And details are on the flyer, which is in our newspaper, www.ucu.webs.com. Download your free copy.
Right.
Okay, that should do it for now.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
One of our sciences called, right, in the modern terms is called astronomy and astrology, right? But the full moon that's coming up, this full moon is the first time that Pluto, right, in 30 years is going direct. Pluto is the planet, the smallest planet, but it has such a dynamic force with it. It's the planet of mass destruction and rejuvenation, right? And then Mars will already be in that mode also. So Mars will be in Scorpio, which is the ruler of Scorpio, and Pluto in Capricorn, right? But the dynamic of this full moon suggests that there will be some type of mass destruction somewhere. So the caution is, and the announcement is, be careful and be wise on where you are and what you're doing, especially next Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday of this upcoming, the 19th, the 20th, and the 21st. That's when that energy is at its peak and will definitely impact every community on the planet.
In one way or the other.
Yes, yes. And it starts with destruction on a mass level, and then rejuvenation is right behind that. Because when the energies come to a climax, they switch into the opposite. So the destruction will come first, and then there'll be mass rejuvenation.
Mm.
So be wise, be cautious, be careful, and be patient. Yes.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes.
Heed the words, people.
Yes.
All right. So, hey, whatever you do, remember to be the best version of you. Be your best. Do your best in all things.
With the rest.
Yes. Have a blessed night.
Yes. Something else, huh?
Tandaroo.